Hello and welcome to Unacademy. As part of your Hindu analysis today, we'll be discussing 5 to 6 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin, a very exciting offer for you, which is a 7-day free trial. If you will use the link given in the description box and if you enroll before 3rd of September, you can use the platform, all of the features, be it online courses, batches, any of the tests, you can use it for free and become a part of the Unacademy family and see the user experience and how our educators are the best in the industry in that regard. So you can use this opportunity to check out Unacademy, Unacademy's platform, how we deal in classes, the raise hand feature to the different aspects of our interaction in class. So this is a very important trial period. It will end after 4th of September. So do enroll before 3rd. With this, let's look at the 5 topics we are going to discuss. When we talk about the Sunday newspaper, we generally have the FAQ section, out of which we have 2 very interesting articles. Then we had an article on 2G ethanol blending and 2G ethanol, what it is, what do you mean by second generation ethanol, and thereafter something related to mental health. This can be used in GS paper 3 also, but in GS paper 4 also, which is ethics. And thereafter we have La Nina setting in, which is not a very good sign for northern India, which is already reeling under a lot of rainfall. So we have 5 topics, simple, straightforward. One is already something we have discussed previously, the UPS, but the need for it. So we'll go through all of them. I have certain questions for you to answer, and I hope that this is going to give you a comprehensive coverage of all of it. Now, let's discuss the first topic. It's also an extension of something which I did last week, which is, does space affect astronauts? Now, the context for this is Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams being stuck in the ISA International Space Station because of the Starliner program. We know that the Starliner program is Boeing's program under which it was going to develop for NASA the second most important crew based aircraft, where 5 crewmen could go. They already have one, which is Dragon, and Dragon crew module is by SpaceX. This is the most successful one and the most reliable after we have the Soyuz rocket of the Russians, and this was a very important project. Since 2017 they are trying to develop this, and in the test flight, in which it was only 1 week, where these 2 stalwarts, or you can say very veteran astronauts, had to go to the International Space Station, go there, come back and prove that this is a safe module. What has happened is that because of helium leaks and multiple thruster failures, now they are stuck. They are stuck till February of 2025. So they had to come within a week, but now there is one Dragon module which is already docked, but that cannot be used because it has 4 seats and there are already 4 astronauts which have to come back in September. So they will wait for the next launch, and once that module is going to come back in February of 2025, their stay has now been extended by 8 months, where it should have been 1 week. Now the question is, Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore are veteran astronauts who have already spent close to 200 plus days. And now the question which is coming through, and there is a very interesting conversation which is developing in and around this, is which is called spaceonomics. Spaceonomics is the study of space, its environment on the human body, and a very well established famous study was when 2 twins, one Mark Kelly and Scott Kelly, one was an astronaut, the other one was on Earth. They have found that close to 8600 genes have expressed change in Scott Kelly, who was in space, vis-a-vis his brother Mark Kelly. Now this develops a certain idea that what is the effect? Are there health effects, long-term effects on astronauts when they come back to the Earth, and is there any long-term issue in being in space for more than 100 days? See, most astronauts don't stay for as long as a period, for example for Sunita Williams or Barry Wilmore, but Scott Kelly and these 3 are considered to be the ones who have spent close to 200 plus days closing a year, and therefore the idea is there has been significant changes in their body. Now this becomes a question of science, this becomes a question of GS paper 3, where we have to understand what can be the probable impacts of a extended stay in space. We are talking about what we call as planet to planet travel, which would mean that if all of us have to leave this planet in a given period where Mars may be the next home for us, the idea is we have close to 3 to 1 year of travel, which we have to 3 months to 1 year of travel based on the spacecraft. You have to cross the intergalactic space, and therefore this could have an effect on the people who are traveling between Earth and Mars. And over and above that, the biggest issue is lack of gravity, and the larger study is what happens when there is no gravity. When on Earth we have 1 Newton, what is called the standard gravity of the Earth. When you go into space, you feel weightlessness, and that can have an impact on the body. So this is the context which this article is trying to build up and trying to argue, and we will now try to understand what are the effects in that regard. Now, if you talk about effects on you and me if we remain in space, the first one is on bones. Because your weight is not on your bones and muscles both start to become weak. Muscles will lose muscle mass, bones will become weaker because you don't need to push your weight on your bones and muscles. So therefore they become weaker. Further, your food in your gut, which uses gravity to some extent to push it through the small intestine and large intestine, that is also gone. So it is believed that you can gain weight at the same point of time when you are losing your muscle mass and your bone density. But what is more concerning is on the heart and on the eyes. Heart shrinks because it is not working against the gravity. So the pumping action has to not be as vigorous as it should be, and therefore it shrinks because the circulation can happen easily. But what is more problematic is called SANS, which is neuroocular syndrome, which is because of fluid building up in the head, there is a lack of vision which comes through, or eyesight gets affected. So because there is no gravity to push your blood down or to push the weight down, fluids tend to move towards the head, and therefore what happens is that there is a lot of fluid which builds up in the sinus, what we call as crevices of the head, and that can affect the eyes itself. Further, blood, you know that in 120 days your red blood cells basically get renewed in that regard through the bone marrow, but the rate of red blood cell, what we call as loss, is higher in the astronauts when they are in space itself. So they have to have a different diet, and over and above that, even brain signals become slower and can be disrupted because of weightlessness. So if you look at an astronaut, there are multiple impacts which are happening when they are in space itself. So eyes, which is eye loss, this is something, eyesight loss is something which they are trying to understand more properly, and more than that, they are also getting more cosmic rays. We have the atmosphere, we have the ozone layer to stop the different UV, UVB, UVA, but what is more important is cosmic rays and rays which are basically radiation are stopped by the atmosphere. However, when they are in the ISA or in the what we call as the space, what happens is that there is no atmosphere to stop these rays, and therefore cosmic radiation also impacts the astronauts. So your eyes, there is a certain eyesight loss which happens because of fluid buildup. You start to become taller in space because your spine is not pushed down, it is basically in weightlessness. Muscle mass is gone, that is for sure. Red blood cell, the what we call as the rate of deterioration or loss is higher. Bone density falls, heart shrinks, and in brain we see anxiety, we see slowness, we also see fatigue, we can see also points of blackouts. You would have seen it, for example, if you have seen previously certain you can say interviews of astronauts who have come back. Whilst in interview itself, they start to feel dizzy, they start to have blackout events because their brain is not able to understand the signals which are coming. The sensory means are now much higher. In space, you don't have to worry about gravity, but the body has to cope gravity in Earth, and therefore there is a major impact there. But there is one more impact, which is the diseases which they get because of all this radiation. One is basic physiological changes. These are physiological changes, how bodies change in space, which is spaconomics. However, there is also a whole plethora of diseases which they get because of the cosmic radiations. So, cataract formation is very common, is extremely common in the astronauts. There is an increased risk of cancer, skin cancer the most common because of the radiation touching the skin, which we don't get because of the ozone layer. Then skin burns because of the direct radiation of the sun also. You can also get degenerative diseases in the neurological sector, fatigue, performance, anxiety. There is a lot of what we call as brain disruption, circulatory system, vomiting, nausea, very common, and also cancer in different parts of the body is very standard impact of what we call as the space journey or prolonged exposure to space and the space environment itself. So, when we talk about astronauts, we don't talk about this aspect that they are getting affected by space itself, and this is where this Starliner program has brought into the conversation the larger concept of spaconomics. For you, what is important is first this word, what is spaconomics, and the aspect of what is the physiological impact. And you can get a question like this in the examination where they can ask you directly that the Starliner controversy has renewed the conversation about astronauts' health and spaconomics. Now, if you don't know what this means, you will not be able to answer this question. And when we talk about astronauts and health, you should know the physiological impacts. So, this type of question can only be answered if you have gone through this type of an article, FAQ of the Hindu newspaper. That is why newspaper reading is important. So, in the introduction part, what we will do is we will add the current affairs part, that Starliner program stuck. These two astronauts are in till February of 2025 in space in the ISA, and thereafter the body. We will talk about two parts. First, physiological changes, bodily changes. Second, disease and the impacts when they come back. And the conclusion, you will talk about the health of the astronauts being very important. More research is needed and such events should be avoided, where Boeing is already losing a lot of credibility and patience with regards to the American government. But the idea is this has complicated for NASA a very straightforward program, and now they have to make sure for the next 1 year they have to make sure that these two come back. So, there is one extra, you can say, mission which has to go through to get them back. It should have been a very straightforward concept. Starliner as it is will be de-docked by November. It will be November or December of 2024 that it will be automatically released from its port, and it will then enter the Earth's atmosphere to check that what would have happened if Williams and Wilmore would have come back in that. So, Starliner has now become a center of attraction, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of context about what is the physiological impact of space on astronauts and spaconomics, what is it. After this, let us move to the second topic. Again a straightforward one. This has been in the news. Shyam sir has already made a video about OPS, NPS, UPS. I discussed it in two back-to-back sessions. What is NPS, the old pension scheme, the what we call unified pension scheme. This is trying to deal with something else, which is why was there a need to change the NPS into UPS. Now, just to refresh your memory, the 5 major aspects about the unified pension scheme were that first there was assured pension after 10% contribution for at least 25 years by an employee. The state as of right now will contribute 18.5%, increasing it from 14 to 18.5, and once he or she completes 25 years of service, he or she will get 50% of whatever was the last drawn salary as pension after retirement, and this may proportionally change if you have served less than 25 years. So, there is already a subset, there is already a condition which is coming through. Second would be that next of kin can get 60% of pension amount once the retired officer is not alive. A minimum pension of 10,000 will be given if you have at least 10 years of service. A retirement corpus is created, lump sum amount can also be taken, and it is inflation index, meaning that there will be adjustment according to inflation and other aspects of what we call as the economy. So, therefore, there is a DA aspect to it. So, therefore, the UPS is considered to be very, very significant because of the reason that it removes the issues which NPS had. In NPS, the contribution of the government was 14%. It has now gone up by 4.5%. That is an additional cost of close to 700 crores. But the aspect was there the contribution of the employee was critical, and there was no assured pension. The aspect was whatever you contribute, it will be created into a corpus, 60% of it can be taken out, 40% was converted into a pension scheme, or all of it could be converted into a pension scheme. But the idea was no assured pension, this 50% was not there. And therefore, there was a lot of hue and cry about NPS being not something which will attract people and the youth into the services itself. And that is where Ashwini Vaishnav and our Prime Minister was very clear to say this is a very important move to introduce financial security and social security for the government employees. Now, the question is, but why? OPS was removed, old pension scheme was removed in 2004. And after 20 years of or 21 years of its work, the idea was, what was the point of removing NPS? OPS was there till to 2004, NPS has been there for the past 21 years. So, why change NPS now? This is the question which this article is trying to answer. We have discussed the aspects, but the question is why? And therein lies 3 points which the article is pushing. The first is that since the beginning there has been a pushback from the government employees about NPS, which is that assured pension is something which they want, and it is a very attractive aspect of the civil services, of government service, that you get pension or the government takes care of you after you have given service to the government. So, the idea was assured pension should always be there. NPS was already a contributory scheme which did not actually create a lot of buzz amongst the bureaucracy, and there was already a pushback. But the reason why recently it has become more and more important to revise the NPS was because NPS based officers, the new what we call as officers who had maybe joined 10, 15, 16 years back, now they started to actually retire. So, with this 21 years, the 2004, 2005, 2006 batch, because of their clearing the examination late, but some of the officers started to now retire. And the problem was that now they were getting benefits much lower than what they were expecting, and relatively very low to what they would have got under OPS. And the aspect where the willpower of the government comes through is because it became an electoral issue. The opposition started to talk about the OPS quite a lot, both in the parliament and in their manifestos, and therefore you can think of the UPS as a midpoint where there was a need to change it. That is why the whole committee was established. But the fact of the matter is, once the pressure got mounted in a coalition government and the way the what we call as UPS could be used as a way of saying that we are trying to bring in confidence back into the bureaucracy, UPS is both a political tool and also a tool for what we call as social security for the government officers. So, the timing is important. The timing is important, and the timing is for the past 2 terms there was no talk about UPS. However, this term they had to do it because as it is more mounting pressure in the parliament because of the lower majority, but more than that there is a lot of pushback which was coming from the bureaucratic circles, and the morale of the civil services is critical for a government to make sure that it can work in the right way. So, this topic has now been discussed in multiple ways, but just understand that there are 4 aspects to it. First is the feature aspect. I hope now this should be etched in your mind after doing it in 5 to 6 different forums, from the special video to CNA to different articles to even UCAN sessions. We have talked about this. The second aspect is the reason why. Why now? This has been answered by this article, that it became an electoral issue, it became an issue with the opposition, and over and above that major pushback with a lot of people retiring, and since the beginning itself nobody liked NPS. The third aspect is going to be how is it going to be implemented. Everybody is waiting for the fine print of UPS. Everybody is saying, even government employees are saying it's a good move with assured pension percentage back. However, this 10% of contribution, they want to know the riders, because 10% is a very big sum when you already only earn close to 1,10,000 when you are for example SDM when you enter. So, because the entry level job in at least group A and B, it is still significant. For CD, it is a separate issue altogether, but for example we take group A and an entry salary is already within the 1 lakh, 1,20,000 range, and you are expecting 10% of it to be pushed into, and for the whole period of the service, it would be a very big amount. The point was that previously NPS did not cap. There was no, you could only cut 1% or 2%, meaning this was the contribution which you were doing. So, you could for namesake also push certain amount, but mostly the government encouraged more than 5 or more than 10%. But the idea is this 10% aspect comes through, and they are looking for fine print and how it is actually going to work, So, everybody is waiting for that. There will be more articles as soon as it becomes very sorted or clear on how UPS is going to work in that sense. But these 3 aspects should be sorted, and the 4th aspect would be the political one, which is of no purpose to a UPSC aspirant, which is how has the opposition or the political parties taken it. They will have their own rhetoric that you have to stay out of. Now, you can get a question on the features, you can get the question on why, you can also get the question on how it is a good move. Previously, I have already given you 3 questions on this, so I hope that you will practice that and this should be sorted for you. After that, let us move to something more significant in with regards to 2G ethanol and enzymes related to it. Now, see, in India there are 2 major issues in North India which develops, which is called stubble burning and pollution. Once we go into that December, January, February phase, every day in the newspaper you will have something related to stubble burning, something related to pollution, multiple studies happening on Delhi, the PM levels going very, very high, the idea that there is a person is smoking close to 40 cigarettes a day in Delhi. Now, stubble burning is a very big issue because because of the upper air circulation, all the stubble which is left after cutting the kharif crop, that stubble is thereafter burnt by the farmers. It adds fertility back to the soil also, but the problem is it produces a lot of pollution, and because of upper air circulation, western disturbances, it moves towards Delhi and the what we call as the Northern Plains, and can contribute in significant development and spikes in the PM 2.5 levels. Now, a solution for this would be to buy stubble from the farmers. Now, the point was, even if you buy stubble from them, what are you going to do with it? And this is where the topics converge, which is stubble burning and ethanol. See, in India as of right now, E10 petrol is available, which is 10% ethanol, 90% petroleum or gasoline, And by 2025, India has already mandated, the government of India has already mandated that there should be E20 petrol, which is 20% ethanol and 80% gasoline, which is called ethanol blending. So, ethanol blending is something which is quite common as of right now, but the percentage will be increased. It allows for our dependence on oil imports to go down, and we have an alternative fuel also. Ethanol or alcohol can be used in different purposes. This is not the same alcohol, this is denatured alcohol, so therefore it is for fuel. Now, how you get that ethanol basically tells you, is it 1G, 2G, 3G or 4G, wherein there are 4 types of ethanols which are available. First generation 1G, 2G, 3G and 4G. Now, the first generation ethanol is the most commonly available, you can say most ubiquitous, most common ethanol which we see, but is the most problematic ethanol, because this ethanol is produced out of sugarcane, corn, wheat or sugar beet, which is it uses food crops. So, the problem with first generation is it uses food crops, and to produce 1 liter of ethanol you need close to 15-16 kgs of corn or 4 to 5 kgs of wheat. Now, in a country where food security is somehow, we are making sure that it is managed properly, still people are hungry. Using food crops to produce ethanol is not something which is advisable. Now, how ethanol is produced is very simple. You can take the corn, mill it, mash it, then ferment. Now, this fermentation process needs enzymes. That is the topic which we have to go after we understand ethanol itself, which is fermentation needs a fungi which is going to ferment it, and the CO2 is produced, and that will be further distilled to produce ethanol and a product called the distilled grains, which can be used in different aspects of construction. Now, in this process enzymes come here, but the problem is you are using physical food crop which could be eaten by somebody and making ethanol out of it. This is considered the worst source of ethanol because it leads to food security concerns. What is in the news as of right now is 2G ethanol, which is ethanol produced by non-edible biomass or biomass produced as way of producing edible biomass, which is wood, straw, grass, waste, and specifically in that is stubble, which is whatever is left in the field after cutting the crop. Now, this is considered a good source because you are using or converting waste into fuel. However, the fungi which is used here, India does not have the enzymes needed for fermentation of this biomass to produce ethanol, and we are importing all of these enzymes as of right now, which makes the cost of ethanol very high. The future is to figure out 3G and 4G ethanol. 3G still exists, which is microalgae based for what we call as decomposition of the waste, or even seaweed being decomposed via microalgae, in turn leading to ethanol production. And the breakthrough which we are waiting for is somehow producing through gasification through algae a 4th generation one. This is the future. This is the future, that we can use the solar energy to then ferment and therefore in turn produce ethanol. So, we are still, this is very expensive, algal based what we call as ethanol. This is not sustainable as of right now. So, rather it is the 2G ethanol which is being talked about at E20 fuel, which is 20% 2G ethanol blending. So, I hope now you understand what is the difference between the 1G, 2G, 3G and 4G, the concept of the G's in ethanol. Now, once we have established this, as I told you that the problem is fermentation. The problem is before distilling you have to ferment, and this fermentation needs enzymes. And what the government of India is thinking, because we import all of our enzymes in that regard, there is now a talk about under Bio E3, this we've also discussed, biotechnology, biomanufacturing for employment, environment and the economy. Bio E3 project and policy they are thinking to develop enzyme manufacturing facilities in and around Manesar, Haryana, because there are already 2G ethanol blending plants in Mathura, in Bhatinda and in Panipat. The Panipat one is quite interesting. Indian Oil Corporation, it uses specifically stubble taken from the farmers and is trying to make sure that the stubble burning process in Punjab and Haryana is stopped. So this is where you can see 3 topics which have already been in the news: Bio E3, ethanol blending, E10 is in the news, E20 now being talked about, and the concept of enzymes is now coming together. So the aspect which is most important here is India would need close to 3.5 billion liters of ethanol by 25-26, and out of that 10 billion liters would be pushed into E20 mandate itself. The problem is we are now bringing and importing all of the enzymes needed for fermentation, and that is a fungi called Penicillium funoculosum, and this fungi has to be genetically engineered because it has to go through a certain process, it has to break down biomass. Therefore, the efficiency of fermentation has to go through genetic engineering, and therein lies bioengineering coming through, the Bio E3 project coming through. So this is where you have to understand that these 2 topics are converging, that Bio E3 and ethanol blending have to go together, and this is something which we will see again in the news further. But for you, what is more important is the static portion of bioethanols and the aspect related to how India has a certain demand for it, and how stubble burning, meaning Delhi's pollution problem, can be solved if we implement this properly. And for the examination, you can get a question like this: Bio E3 could be a game changer for ethanol industry, analyze. This is a very standard question, or very representative question which you can get in GS paper 3 science and tech. This is a very important topic which you have to understand. Bio E3 we discussed previously. I've discussed it in the 2 what we call as CNAs which I had. However, now ethanol industry comes in, how things converge together. So first 3 topics were in a way a revision and also an addition into what we already know. We knew about the Starliner program also, we know about Bio E3 also, and we knew about the UPS also. But now because of Starliner, the conversation with regards to the health of the astronauts is coming through, first thing. Second thing which we now understand further is the aspect related to how it impacts them overall. Second, UPS we understood why rather than what, and in this we now see the application of Bio E3 in the ethanol industry to see, okay, this is how the government is thinking about a larger picture of how they implement certain aspects of their what we call as policy, and Bio E3 could be a very important game changer. With this, the last 2 topics, this one is a smaller topic, an easier one, then we have the La Nina one. The aspect related to mental health is now becoming more and more important. NIMHANS in Bangalore is one of the most leading research zones and research space for mental health, one of the best hospitals for neurological health in India. And the question was that with children getting addicted to the internet, and one major addiction which is developing is gaming addiction, and what is being seen nowadays in schools is because of this gaming addiction, children are having what we call as a certain attentive disorder, meaning that they are not attentive in class. They are developing anxiety, they don't want social interaction, they want to just be glued to the screens itself, and online gaming addiction is a very big issue. There is an example of a person, of a child whose name has been changed, a 19-year-old, can't call him a child also, an adolescent, 19-year-old Rohan, name changed. He initially started 2-3 hours maximum of online gaming. Now as a hobby it started, he now has started to skip meals, withdrawn from social interaction, and is now addicted to online gaming. And this is both a mental health issue and also an ethical issue where the online gaming industry is making sure that students are and children are glued to the screens which they are using, be it phone, be it Xboxes, be it any form of gaming device. Now, the NIMHANS researchers, what they wanted to understand was, how can we tackle this? And this is where they have developed a new therapy which is called mindfulness therapy. The mindfulness therapy aspect is that they are trying to develop a certain program through which the students and the adolescents can be pushed through, in which mindfulness based interventions based on meditation, based on interaction, based on control over emotions, they can tackle internet gaming disorder, IGD. This has now been properly developed, something called IGD. So, what mindfulness tries to promote is focused non-judgmental awareness of present moment. Basically, they want them to see what they are doing at that given point of time. It is about being mindful of where they are and the present being very, very important rather than the game itself. And therefore, it is about self-awareness, it is about acceptance, but emotional regulation. So, this could be something which we also have developed with regards to shorts, with regards to Instagram shorts. We all are glued to our phones. We all have this certain aspect of just going through reel after reel after reel for hours. 2-3 hours view, we are basically watching 1 minute shorts. You can go for 2-3 hours without realizing that it has been 2-3 hours. And the aspect here is very simple, that this in turn means that we have to stay in the moment and have to change. This is now becoming an epidemic within children, which is the concept of IGD. And therefore, NIMHANS developing this is a very significant development, and for you it will be important, because if they ask you something related to mental health in, for example, essay also in GS paper 3 or even in GS paper 4, do remember to talk about the NIMHANS study on mindfulness, meditation, non-judgmental focused understanding of the present, controlling emotions, emotional intelligence in that regard, and this is where the reversing of this process is very important. We have a generation of students and the demographic dividend getting caught up in this disorder, and it is a very big issue for the productivity of India, for the health of our children, for the health of our adolescents. So, we have to make sure that we do something about this, and NIMHANS is trying to do their own part by developing a certain program. So, I hope that you will again take this word out. There are certain terms which we learn in every CNA. Mindfulness studies or mindfulness therapy is something which I want you to remember. 2G, 3G, 4G, 1G ethanol you already know. Now, the last topic which we cover is related to again a static concept, which is La Nina. Now, India for the past 2 to 3 years has been reeling under El Nino. And the reversal of what is called ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation, is La Nina. Now, in very layman terms, as we discuss it in history also, El Nino would mean that there will be droughts in India, failure of the monsoons, the precipitation level goes down. On the other hand, La Nina, it is the exact reverse, which is there will be a intensity of the monsoon is going to increase, and there will be flood like situations mostly in North India. When the retreating monsoon should weaken, it is going to become more stronger. And what La Nina does is it increases the cyclones in the Bay of Bengal and in the Arabian Sea. And there is already one, the Asna, which is developing within the Arabian Sea, now is going to dissipate, but Bay of Bengal will get multiple cyclones. And La Nina, what the IMD is arguing, the Indian Meteorological Department is arguing, that in North India there will be more rain than expected, and the government should be ready for it. North India is expecting heavy rainfall, and the IMD already has seen 9% above normal rainfall in North India, and therefore Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Delhi, and for Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh it is not good news, because what will happen is cloudbursts and landslides will keep on increasing, and as it is, Delhi has shown the whole case of what happened in Old Rajendra Nagar and even other parts of Delhi where people are dying because of electrocution or waterlogging. And therefore, La Nina, in a way, India is either reeling under El Nino or La Nina, but La Nina is going to this time wreak havoc throughout the sector. Now the question is, what is La Nina then? How does La Nina come through? In layman terms, La Nina means more rain, El Nino means less rain. But the concept is related to what we call as ENSO, the concept of El Nino Southern Oscillation. This is based on the equatorial line between Australia and Peru and Chile, which is basically the concept of Tahiti and Darwin. The pressure differences between Tahiti and Darwin in Australia is seen to be very, very important. Now the concept is very simple. The concept is, you have Australia here, you have Chile and Peru. The simple aspect is, warm water means low pressure, cold water means high pressure. So there's something called upwelling which happens, which is water circulating in the Pacific itself. And if in normal years, what is important is that there would be cold water here because of the upwelling along the equatorial axis, and this will develop a high pressure, and near Australia there will be a low pressure because of warm water. And therefore, there will be the upper air circulation of the trade winds along this line, and these trade winds will then become displaced and will become the southwestern monsoon. So basically, this circulation is very, very important, southern equatorial or what we call equatorial current, and therefore this will then turn and become the monsoons in India. If this is standard, we see it neither a negative or a positive year, we will have normal monsoons in that regard. Now what happens in an El Nino year is, because of water upwelling within the Pacific itself, which is the movement of the circulation of water because of pressure the temperature difference, this in turn leads to this cold water being replaced by warm water. And what will happen is that this high pressure is going to weaken, and there will be a lot of rainfall which will happen in Chile, Peru, which generally is considered to be dry. Now with this high pressure going down and with cold water coming here, this low pressure weakens. So what would have been 100% like this will only come till 60%, and once it is 60% here, then the monsoons become weak. This is called an El Nino year. It is called an El Nino year. The equatorial counter current becomes very, very strong, and therefore there will be warmer temperatures here, and therefore in turn will have very wet climate in the American coast and the Chile and Peru coast, but it will in turn lead to this intensity of monsoons becoming very low. Now the exact concept the exact opposite concept is La Nina. So do remember that it has two things in it. First, the water based upwelling, which is the temperature based upwelling in the Pacific. Further, that impacts the upper air circulation, and the equatorial counter current becomes much stronger and in turn leads to the weakening of the monsoons. Now in a La Nina year, the exact opposite happens. In a La Nina year, the cold water becomes extremely concentrated and the high pressure becomes very high, and therefore warm water is pushed into the Australian coast, and therefore the current, or which we were saying, for example 100%, this will become 150%, because the high pressure has now gone up and the low pressure has also in a way intensified. And that is why, because of intensified low pressure, there will be a lot of low pressure based cyclones developing in the Bay of Bengal, and therefore in La Nina year there will be more rainfall in India and the monsoons become extremely powerful. This is called the erratic natures of the monsoon, and something called Indian Ocean dipole also, which is the temperature difference in the eastern and the western Indian Ocean, that also impacts it. If you have both positive, it will lead to severe drought. If they are both negative, it will lead to severe what we call as waterlogging and flooding. And if, for example, for the past 2 to 3 years, though we had El Nino, the Indian Ocean dipole was positive for us, so therefore it was cancelling it out. So Indian Ocean dipole is Indian Ocean, west and east, the temperature changing, and if the eastern sector is having warm temperatures, it intensifies the low pressure, at least in the southwestern sector, which allows for monsoons to enter. So remember, it is these trade winds which become displaced once crossing the equator, in turn leading to what is called the Coriolis effect based turning towards the right in the northern hemisphere, which in turn will lead to the winds going into or entering through the what we call as Kerala coast and the Western Ghats. So I hope that this is again a revision for you with regards to what is El Nino and La Nina, but you should now know, for the past 2 to 3 years we've been writing in the examination that we are reeling under El Nino, reeling under El Nino. Now we have confirmation that this is going to be a La Nina year. So what have we done through these 5 topics? We've understood UPS why, we've understood the aspect related to why do astronauts face a lot of difficulties when they come back, health issues. Then we've also understood the aspect related to El Nino, La Nina, then 2G ethanol blending, the aspects related to that, and over and above that we've tried to understand how online gaming addiction is becoming a problem and how the NIMHANS has now developed a certain program for it. Remember that the 7-day trial program is going to end on 3rd of September. If you really want to experience the teaching, the aspects, the interface of Unacademy, if you're confused in that, you should once try and come on the platform. You just have to register, come on the platform the next 7 days. It is free of cost. Look at, you meet the teachers, interact with them, see the platform. With this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much. Have a happy Sunday. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.